Hello. Okay, so hello, we're going to do this again. I'm going to try to go quicker, but we've got more questions, so I don't think that's possible. Chapters 39 and 40 are all I'm going to cover in this video. So what is ironic about Lydia's pronouncement that we mean to treat you all to supper? First of all, it's ironic because Lydia says that, but then she says, but we're going to need to borrow money because we've spent all of ours. This is the first time that we really see Lydia in the entire book where she's a character on her own. We do have her statement earlier when Mrs. Bennet makes the comment about, I'm sure Mr. Bingley will dance with you. And Lydia says, oh, well, I'm taller, even though I'm the youngest of all of them. This is going to start introducing Lydia more to us. The fact that she says, we mean to treat you all to supper. So we planned on treating you all, but we decided there was something else that was important, and it was a bonnet. And oh, by the way, the bonnet was really ugly, but we decided to buy it anyway because, hey, it was there, so we might as well purchase it. This shows one of the examples of Lydia's immaturity, but it also introduces her in a way that she hasn't been introduced to us before. So I want you to keep that in mind because she has, she's talked about how she wants to go to Brighton for the summer because all of the militia officers are going to Brighton. The camp is leaving, and that's question number 2. Where does she want to go for the summer? It's Brighton. But if you listen to her conversation and you listen to her discussions and her thought process, she's not mature. And remember, we talked about how girls were not supposed to be out into society until they were at a certain age. Normally it was about 17, 18 years old, depending on how mature the girl was. And this just is an example of how she should not be out in society. Even Lady Catherine was stunned when Lady Catherine said, and you have 5 sisters and all of them are in society. She was really surprised because normally it's because the first one has to marry and then the second one, depending on how old they are. And then the third one will come out. Well, one of the older 2 sisters marries if they're very close in age. If they're not close in age, you wait until the older one is married first because you don't want to throw more girls out onto the market to muddy up men's sensibilities because, men can't handle too many pretty girls, apparently. But the idea here is that Lydia should not be out in company. Lydia does not have the idea of how to behave properly. She's not good with money. She's very frivolous. So that just kind of shows that. And then when question number 3, why does Lydia divulge about Mr. Wickham's future? And she mentions Mary King being engaged to Mr. Wickham. She's really kind of frustrated about the whole thing, but Elizabeth almost has a sigh of relief. Elizabeth is actually, she does have a sigh of relief, and she even makes the comment, I think that the militia should be removed from Meryton, and we should be removed from the militia, because she's recognizing the ill behavior of her sisters and how, once again, to go back to the other lecture and to the other previous chapters, it's their fault. The family, yes, we talked about Mr. Bingley's culpability, and I completely agree with it. But had the family behaved properly, they wouldn't even have had that issue. They wouldn't have had the issue at all. And because of Lydia's behavior and because of Kitty's behavior and the other Bennets as well, minus Jane and Elizabeth, and Jane is starting to recognize. And you felt it before. You felt that when, you've got certain things in your family where people behave a certain way and you're like, oh, well, it's just my strange uncle Bob or whatever. And you're like, he just acts like that. But then when other people start to see that behavior, that's when you start to say, wait a second, maybe this isn't the way people are supposed to act. Maybe those kind of jokes aren't appropriate, or that behavior isn't appropriate. And that's when you start reevaluating your life and your family. And that's really what Elizabeth was doing. And so she was recognizing that it was a good thing that the militia was leaving, because if the militia didn't leave, Lydia and Kitty were going to get more out of control than they already were. There's one scene where Lydia mentions how she and Kitty should go down, and it's not right here, it's further back, but she and Kitty should go and surprise the officers before they're dressed. I don't think it has the same meaning that it does to us as back then. I think it just meant in their formal uniforms. So, but it's still something that a young woman shouldn't have said. It was very inappropriate for her to have said that, which is very Lydia. Let's look at question number 4. Why is Elizabeth shocked at Lydia's description of Mary King and Wickham's affections? And I'm going to actually read this part, so please bear with me. I tried to make notations and mark all of my Once again, my little book. Oh, Elizabeth, I apologize because right now we learned that Wickham is no longer engaged to Mary King because her uncle has come and taken her and removed her from Meryton and removed her from Mr. Wickham. And Elizabeth says, Lydia says, Mr. Wickham is safe. And Elizabeth says, we should say Mary King is safe. Safe from a connection imprudent as to fortune. She is a great fool for going away if she liked him. But I hope there's no strong attachment on either side, said Jane. I am sure there is not. And this is the answer to question number 4. I am sure that there's not on his, says Lydia. I will answer for it if he never cared 3 straws about her. Who could? Such a nasty, ugly little freckle-faced thing. Elizabeth was shocked to think that however incapable of such coarseness of expression, herself, the coarseness of the sentiment, was little other than her own breast had formerly harbored and fancied liberal. So Elizabeth is like, whoa, wait a second. I might not have said it the way that Lydia said it, but I would have thought it that way. And so now she's reevaluating herself and she's saying, wait a second. I'm not acting properly. I am not thinking properly because in her mind, Mr. Wickham was perfect. He was infallible. And she's starting to realize, ever since Darcy's letter, she was made aware of Wickham's propensities for sin and debaucheries. But she's starting to realize that she herself was prejudiced in the fact that she only saw good in Mr. Wickham because he, to be honest, agreed with everything she said about Darcy. And now that her opinion of Darcy has changed, her opinion of Wickham has changed as well. And so she's really ashamed of herself. This is a book about not just a love story, as I mentioned before, but it's a lot of character growth and development and self-realization. And that's what she's doing here. She is realizing that she was to blame, that a lot of the circumstances that have occurred would not have happened if it wasn't for her poor opinion of Mr. Darcy, or a good opinion of Mr. Wickham. So let's continue on with question number 5. Oh, question number 5. Okay, so I'm going to read this little bit to you. So they get into the carriage and Lydia says, well, now let us be quite comfortable and snug and talk and laugh all the way home. And in the first place, let us hear what has happened to all of you since you went away. Have you seen any pleasant men? Have you had any flirting? I was in great hopes that one of you would have got a husband before you came back. Jane will be quite an old maid soon, I declare. She is almost 23. Oh, how ashamed I should be of not being married before 23. That in itself, and obviously there's more that continues on, but Lydia is not focused on the proper things of life. She is all about the chase. She's all about the hunt. She's all about having a good time and partying. And you're like, okay, Shro, but she's 15 years old. Big deal. Yeah, she's 15 years old. But at that time, there were more expectations placed upon a young lady than there are in today's society. So for Lydia to say that, that shows her lack of maturity because, as you will see further on when we meet, for example, Georgiana Darcy, or even if we had met Elizabeth at this age, yes, Elizabeth would still have the fun, go-getter kind of attitude, but we can see that Jane and Elizabeth are very proper, and they have been taught to be proper from an early age, where Lydia has just been allowed to run amok. I know you guys are like, Mama Shro, it's this one. Question number 6. What did Mr. Bennet say during dinner to Lizzie? Which was quite loving for that time period for a father towards a daughter. He says, more than once during dinner, Mr. Bennet said voluntarily to Elizabeth, I am glad you are come back, Lizzie. He was very happy that she was home. So it was very sweet. What does Mary prefer over congenial frivolity? Let's go back to question number 7. What could Mr. Bennet's statement show? That could, once again, show just his love for Elizabeth and how she is his favorite. Question number 8, Mary prefers a good book. And don't kid yourself, I prefer a good book too. I love me a good book. But Occasionally I do prefer female frivolity. And let's look at question number 9. The Brighton scheme was that they were continually trying to, they meaning Mrs. Bennet and Lydia, were trying to convince Mr. Bennet that they needed to go to Brighton. All right, that's the end of chapter 39. Let's go ahead and add those up. Put the number correct over at the top, pass them forward so Easton, Nick, or Austin could collect them. Ha ha, just kidding. Let's look at chapter number 40. Number 1, what grieved Jane about Darcy's proposal? Oh, sweethearted Jane. Jane was grieved because she felt that Mr. Darcy had delivered his sentiments in a manner so little suited to recommend them, but still more she was grieved for the unhappiness which her sister's refusal must have given him. So she felt sorry because she knew Mr. Darcy was probably just devastated that Elizabeth wouldn't marry him and said no. Question number 2, why was the information about Wickham so difficult for Jane? I'll use a direct quote and then I'll mention something. Jane, who would willingly have gone through the world without believing that so much wickedness existed in the whole race of mankind. Jane is pure. She has a very pure heart, very tender. Jane is the kind of person that can't imagine evil because she would never perform evil herself. She knows that there's bad in the world, obviously, but such wickedness as someone who is so connected closely to the family, attempting to ruin a naive 15-year-old girl just for her money, and goes out into society in other parts of the country talking trash on that family, but also acting like it's no big deal and flirting and proposing to other girls, Mary King. Jane is just shocked and it almost sickens her. It almost physically, she has a visceral reaction to the pain that Georgiana Darcy must have felt and what she imagines herself she would have felt also. Number 3, what is the significance of Elizabeth's entire quotation? And yet I meant to be uncommonly. So I will read it. Oh, that's a long one. I will read that quotation to you. And yet I meant to be uncommonly clever in taking so decided a dislike to him without any reason. It is such a spur to one's genius, such an opening for wit to have disliked of that kind. One may be continually abusive without saying anything just, but one cannot be always laughing at a man without now and then stumbling on something witty. And so what she meant by that was she planned on just mocking him and being clever and thinking that that was enough for her to get by. And she recognized that she has faults. It comes down to Elizabeth Bennet having faults and the self-realization that she had attempted to just dislike him and move on with her life and just be witty and mock him whenever she could. And then she realizes she can't do that. He doesn't deserve her scorn. He doesn't deserve the treatment that she gave him. So let's move on to question number 4. What do you think is the significance of removing the title Mr. when Jane and Elizabeth are speaking of Mr. Wickham? The fact that they don't call him Mr. Wickham removes any type of respect that they have for him. Wickham or Smith or Landon or Davis or whatever last name you can think of without Mr. or Mrs. in front of it, that's how you refer to servants. That's how you refer to people of the lower class. So they are saying that Wickham does not even deserve the respect of the term Mr. in front of him. Number 5, what was Jane's reason for agreeing with Elizabeth to not publicize Wickham's indiscretions? Elizabeth says, Mr. Darcy has not given me, he's not allowed me to make these public about his sister especially. And Jane's like, oh, and I'm sure Mr. Wickham is trying to change his character. Sweet little naive Jane. Number 6, what was the, quote, other half of Mr. Darcy's letter which Elizabeth would not divulge to Jane? The other half was how Mr. Darcy had broken Jane and Bingley up. Please put the number correct over 6, ladies and gentlemen, and that concludes chapters 39 and 40. I will also post chapters 41 and 42 and then a separate of 43. Have a great day.